Like, if you look at a lot of mock drafts right now, and I know they mean absolutely nothing right now because we're sitting here on September 19th, mock drafts don't mean shit at this point in time. Because right now, the Cincinnati Bengals are 0-2, along with the Baltimore Ravens sitting at 0-2, two of the worst teams in the NFL. They're going to have high draft picks. You really think once the draft rolls around that those two teams will be picking up in the top 5 of the draft? Highly doubt it. I highly doubt those two teams will be up there. So right now, there's no real point. Drake May just got planted. There's really no point of making mock drafts right now. But if you pay attention to that kind of thing, like I do, regardless, don't worry, I'm not planning on making one anytime soon. Maybe around late October, but nothing right now. Nothing right now. If you looked at them, the top 2 quarterbacks for most people out there right now are Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck. And understandable. Quinn Ewers walked into Ann Arbor against Michigan and put up a great performance and absolutely dominated and kicked the shit out of the defending national champions, or the shell of the defending national champions. Carson Beck, week 1, didn't have the greatest game against Clemson, but quarterbacked a game where they won 34-3. Like, these are 2 very, very good quarterbacks. And depending on who you ask, along with Shedeur Sanders, those are your top 3 quarterbacks in the class, depending on whatever the order they want to say it is. And right now, that is a highly, highly, highly talked about discussion because there's a lot of factors that weigh in to why you have each quarterback where. A lot of factors weigh into that, especially when you look at Shedeur Sanders. Because a lot of what Shedeur Sanders, his problem to a lot of people out there, has nothing to do with how he is on the football field. To some people, yes. Because some people, again, say he holds on the ball too long, which he does at times. There's sometimes his reads are a little bit too long, and they're delayed throws. Sometimes that happens. And sometimes he holds on to the ball too long, and he takes a lot of unnecessary sacks. That is true. But the talent is there. He's got the arm. He might not be the most electric athlete, but he's a good athlete. He can maneuver the pocket when needed. He can climb the pocket. He can roll out when needed. He can throw on the run. He can throw without any firm base. We saw him do that this past week against Colorado State. Throw with absolutely no base with the pocket completely swallowed around him and still delivered a ball down the near sideline for a first down. Now the receiver is open. The receiver was open. But still, when you have no base like that and just throw it all with your arm, but I think it's lost on some people that quarterbacking is like mostly with your legs, your lower body. So when you throw that thing with only your arm, it's pretty hard. You have to have a pretty decent arm to make it over there. I would recommend looking up the play if you haven't seen it at this point. But talent's not the problem with Shedeur Sanders. It's all off the field stuff. Because for some people, some of the things he's done this season are things you don't necessarily want in a franchise quarterback. They're fine, again, like we brought up last week, it's fine to do this kind of stuff when you're a corner or a receiver. But when you're the quarterback, you have to be careful with literally everything you say. Everything. I know you're going to slip up here and there because you're only human. We're not robots. But still, you've got to be really careful. You can't go out in a press conference after a loss to Nebraska and ask the reporter how many times the Nebraska quarterback got touched. You can't do that. It doesn't matter if there was malintent around throwing your offensive line under the bus. You can't do that because that's how it will come off. We brought it up last week. Zach Wilson did the exact same thing. Do you feel any responsibility for how poor your offense has been? No. It doesn't matter if that's how you feel. It doesn't matter if people know that your offensive line's bad or there's other factors to why the offense is bad. Guess what? You're the quarterback. It all lies on your shoulders. It all falls at your feet. Whether you like it or not, you're going to have to accept it. And calling out players on the offensive side of the ball is not one way to do that. You will lose the locker room fairly quick. And after the game against Colorado State, the offensive line stood behind Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter after the game. I think I brought this up on Wednesday's show. I don't know if that was genuine or not. I couldn't tell if it was like a staged thing or not. But hey, good gesture, nonetheless. But the thing that happened this week, so it obviously happened last week against Nebraska. But the thing everybody's all up in arms with this week was the handshake after the game. That's the thing everybody was problem with. And we brought this up on Wednesday's show like we said before, and Shedeur Sanders refused to say shake Fowler Nicolossi's hand. Nicolossi's hand after the game. I don't have a problem with that. I do not have a problem with that. Because people want to focus on that. And that's fine. And that's where you paint your narrative. That's fine. You can focus on that. Shaking hands with a guy who was talking shit and was trying to do a flyby handshake. He wasn't trying to walk up to Shedeur Sanders and do like the fighter thing and say, hey, good game. I respect you. Good job. No, he was doing the flyby thing and Shedeur Sanders let him know. And the thing about it is, it's kind of getting lost in the picture here, lost in the fray, is Shedeur Sanders still went around and shook everybody's hand after the game. That was the only time he didn't shake a hand. He shook the coach's hand. He shook other players' hands. It was just that one guy, the quarterback for Colorado, who's talking loads of shit before the game. That's the difference. I don't have an issue with that, if I'm being 100% honest with you. And Shedeur Sanders is out there. Everybody knows Shedeur Sanders because his dad's Deion. Colorado is a team that everybody talks about, regardless of how good they actually are. And you got players like Travis Hunter on the team who might very well be the number one overall pick in the draft, depending on who you ask. As a corner or wide receiver, it doesn't really matter at this point. He very well may be the number one overall pick in the draft. They're going to get talked about. Deion Sanders is a very, what's the word to use here? He's a very big personality. So people are going to gravitate towards that. He was that way as a player. One of the greatest players of all time. One of the greatest athletes of all time. The greatest cornerback of all time. People love Deion. They loved the story at the beginning of last year where Colorado started off 3-0 after winning one game the season prior, beating a top 25 ranked TCU team that just went to the national championship game. Like, that was fun. Doesn't matter. Don't look back at what TCU ended up being. Just at that point in time, that was insane. That was absolutely insane to see. Beating Nebraska, having the overtime game against Colorado State. And then after that, they won one game. And after that 3-0 start, and you win one game the rest of the year, people are going to fall off a little bit because you're still in the media. People still talk about you. So every little thing Shedeur Sanders does, good or bad, is going to get talked about, regardless of whether he likes it or not. So with that being said, like I talked about, you're the starting quarterback, you cannot go out there and bash your teammates. On purpose or not, you've got to be careful with that because you're under a bigger microscope than every other quarterback in this draft class. Whether your name's Quinn Ewers, Cameron Ward, Jalen Milroe, Carson Beck, Shedeur Sanders is under a microscope more than any other quarterback in this draft class by a long shot because of his name and the team they play for. Everybody's going to microanalyze him. Every single person out there. From him holding on to the ball too long, or for him throwing an amazing ball down the sideline in double coverage that he fits perfectly in a window to Travis Hunter in the end zone for a touchdown. Or he doesn't shake XYZ's player's hand after the game. Everything he does will be under his microscope. And some people out there, and some teams out there, will completely take him off their draft board. I brought this up a couple weeks ago. There's sometimes I wouldn't be shocked. This is not my opinion, but I wouldn't be shocked. I should say I don't share this opinion, but I wouldn't be shocked if he didn't get drafted in the first round. It has nothing to do with talent. And I don't care about the not shaking hands thing. I'm perfectly fine with that. But there's some people that's going to completely rub the wrong way. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But right now, as we sit here with the likes of Beck, Quinn Ewers, Shedeur Sanders to me right now is the quarterback one in this draft class based off play. Based off play right now, Shedeur Sanders is QB1. And like we said last week, this is going to be a very fluid list every single week because there's no Caleb Williams in this draft. We don't have that. There's no Trevor Lawrence in this year's draft. Everybody knows who's going to be the number one overall pick in the draft. No one knows this year. There's not really been a guy that's taken the position of QB1 by the scruff of the neck. So this position for me will probably change every single friggin' week. Because, I'm sorry, with Colorado entering Big 12 play, and I don't necessarily have the most faith in Colorado going into Big 12 play, I don't think Shedeur Sanders will be playing at the insanely high level, but if he does, that further explains why he's QB1 in this draft class, because he's playing on a team that's not the greatest. Have some peace in there. Like Horn's a very good player. Wester's had a good couple weeks for Colorado. Obviously, Travis Hunter's there. But when Big 12 play starts and Colorado starts to dip a little bit again, Shedeur Sanders' play will probably dip at the same time. Not a lot. I'm not even sitting here and saying like he's going to drop completely out of the top 10. That is insane to think about. He's not even going to probably ever drop out of the top 3 quarterbacks in this draft class, in my opinion. Could be wrong. Obviously, we're in week 3 of college football. We're entering week 4. So that can obviously change. But for the here and now, based off what I saw against Colorado State, with the 4 passing touchdowns that he had in the game, and really nice passing touchdowns as well, like he had one from 4 yards out. He saw the safety lacking in the slot. Safety was kind of looking around, asking his teammates for help. Shedeur Sanders saw that, hit the slant instantly. It was the only read. He saw that pre-snap, only read, touchdown. Brought the throw to Travis Hunter in the end zone, down the right sideline. Really good throw. Fitted in a window between 2 defenders. We brought up the throw where he threw it with all his upper body and no legs. I think it was to Wester. It was either to Wester or Shepard. I can't remember exactly who it was to. He threw a really nice... Oh, wait, no, I'm mixing games up. Did he have a back shoulder throw in here? I believe he did. I think I'm mixing up a couple games here. Yeah, I'm mixing up a couple games here. Carson Beck had a nice back shoulder throw, but we'll get to Carson Beck here in a little bit. But yeah, I like what I saw from Shedeur Sanders against Colorado State. I didn't like what I saw against Nebraska. That pick 6 he threw, where he was extremely late on the hitch route or the curl route, whatever you want to call it. Defender had enough time to recover, jumped the route, picked it off, scored a touchdown from 10 yards out or wherever it was. Like, that's not great, because he does hold on the ball a little bit too long. Whether that's in the pocket or making reads. Sometimes he's a little late. He had one of those throws where it was a comeback route, not a back shoulder throw, but it was a comeback route. A very good throw. He threw from the near hash to the far sideline. It's a very long throw. But a lot of coaches will tell you throw it right when he breaks. He threw it a little bit later, but still, really good throw. I'm nitpicking here a little bit with that throw. But yeah, after week 3, Shedeur Sanders is QB1 at this point in time. And it will be subject to change. There's no guaranteeing he'll be QB1 next week. There's not. They enter Big 12 play against Baylor. They're at home. I believe they're the favorite because they're at home. Baylor's not a pushover anymore. They're pretty side. I got to be careful. But this will be interesting to see. It will be interesting to see. QB2, though, is Carson Beck. We said this last week on the show and in the video for the quarterback rankings from last week that Kentucky can make this thing a little bit more interesting than what other people are giving it credit for. Kentucky, the week before, got ass blasted by South Carolina. They were what? What were they favored in again? They were a 9.5-point favorite at home and got beat 31-6. And it turns out it wasn't an indictment on Kentucky with that loss. It was more of just South Carolina's pretty solid, as we just saw them play LSU really close. Probably should have won that game last week. But Kentucky played this game really close, and a lot of people, with them being 23-point dogs, kind of wrote them off. And understandably, I mean, we watched Georgia beat Clemson 34-3 week 1, whatever the score was, and just beat the piss out of Tennessee Tech. Like back-to-back weeks of that, and Kentucky just lost 31-6 to South Carolina. And now we're going to sit here and say, like, Kentucky has a chance against Georgia? You're crazy. But Kentucky at night, they have pulled off upsets in Lexington at night before. They usually play Georgia tough. And Georgia has those games at least once a year where they play an SEC team that they actually should step on and put out of their misery fairly quick. They always have one game a year, it feels like. Especially if it's early in the season. Like one of their first 2 SEC games, they struggle with. I don't know what it is. Because Georgia has enough players to absolutely steamroll Kentucky. But they didn't. And they usually don't when it's within these first 2 weeks. But Carson Beck individually didn't have his greatest game of all time. Like he went 15 of 24 for 160 yards, no touchdowns. Didn't have any interceptions, though. Had 18 yards rushing on the game as well. So again, that 160 yards is the least amount of yards Beck has had since he became the full-time starter at Georgia, and the only other time since it was from a season ago, it's the lowest number of yards he has, and it's only the second time as well where he has had less than 200 yards passing. The last time came against Georgia Tech in the last game of the regular season. He's had a couple games here and there where he hasn't thrown a passing touchdown, but still, it wasn't like a game that he played the greatest. He made some good throws in the game, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that a lot of people expected Georgia to struggle like they did in this game and then be losing at halftime. They didn't score a touchdown until the fourth quarter. Of the fourth quarter, Georgia did not score a touchdown. They stacked some field goal drives at the end of the first half and the start of the second half. They got the rushing touchdown in the fourth quarter. And then, yeah, that was pretty much it. But Carson Beck, there's a couple throws in there that I really liked in this game against Kentucky. Like, there was one throw, I believe it was in the second half, or not, I know it was in the second half, but a nice 33-yard pass to Lovett. And there was a, before I mentioned that play, there's a throw he had that probably should have been picked off, but Lovett made a very good play on the ball to come back to the ball, scoop it up, went right off the Kentucky defender's fingers. Should have been picked. Really bad throw from Beck, but good play from Lovett. Carson Beck should love it. They love it. Caught the ball. Bar? Question mark? Maybe. Who the hell knows? But Lovett and Beck did hook up again. There was one play, the one I'm talking about now, where Kentucky had a free rusher. The left tackle for Georgia and the running back kind of got their wires crossed. It went to block the same person, leaving the left side D end wide open to get after Beck. And he took a shot on Beck. And Lovett was open to a certain extent, but with a defender coming off the edge like that, with that much pressure and that much speed, and Beck knowing he's going to get hit, sometimes quarterbacks will brace for that. And you want to see your quarterback stand tall in the pocket and deliver a ball down the field. Shedeur Sanders did that this past week against Colorado State. Beck, you want to see do that as well. And with the defender coming in hot and Lovett being somewhat open, there were still some defenders in the area. There was one in front of Lovett, like I would say about 5-yard difference, maybe 7-yard difference. But with that defender coming in, that ball can sometimes flutter. There's no guarantee that's going to make it there. And Beck did. But there's no guarantee he was always going to make it there. And then Beck brought the back shoulder throw earlier. He had a nice little back shoulder throw down the far sideline to Colby Young, which is a very nice play. Very nice. I love back shoulder throws. If you listen to my show last year when talking about Michael Penix and Roma Dunze, which I think is the most lethal back shoulder quarterback wide receiver tandem I've seen ever in college football. It was insane. The telepathic communication they had for back shoulder throws was ridiculous. And that showed, the reason I love back shoulder plays so much is because of the fact that the wide receiver and quarterback got to be on the exact same page every freaking time. And if they're not, then the quarterback's going to throw it deep, receiver cuts it short. Or the receiver goes deep, quarterback throws it short, and it's either incomplete or you're turning the ball over. Or in the Bills situation last year against Cincinnati Bengals, it's intentional grounding. The only time that's ever happened, it's intentional grounding with that. But very good concentration, really good connection between Young on the play as well. He also had a play to Dylan Bell as well for 33 yards. They got to 2nd and 20, and he threw it right up the middle. Bell with the defender on his back, in some traffic too. Delivered an absolute strike to Bell for, I think they called it a first down after that. Going for 2nd 20 to first down in one play, that's a pretty good feeling. That's a pretty damn good feeling, not going to lie. But Beck overall in this game, like that drive, those 3 throws that I brought up were all from one drive. That was the touchdown drive. And Beck has those throws in him where they're like, those are great throws. But in this game, there just wasn't, I don't know. It was just, it was a typical Georgia early SEC game where they should have beat the shit out of them, and they didn't. In a game where, on paper, 23-point favorites, Kentucky's coming off a 31-6 loss where they're 9.5-point favorites. Games like that, you would think, on paper again, Georgia should absolutely steamroll them, and they didn't. And that's fine. It's early SEC play. Very early SEC play. And Georgia's going into a bye week this week. So they have enough time to regroup, recover, come back to this game strong, and, coming to the next week firing hot. Number 3 quarterback on this list, obviously, is Quinn Ewers. Didn't play a whole lot in this game. Got hurt But went 14-16, had 185 yards, 2 touchdowns, did throw a pick in this game as well. 8 touchdowns, 2 picks on the season. Arch Manning, again, is starting against Louisiana Monroe. We'll see how he does. I hope Quinn Ewers comes back, fully recovers for that game against Mississippi State. Going to be a fun one to see, but in games like UTSA, you just want to see your quarterback make smart decisions. That's what Quinn Ewers did. He had the pick, sure, but still played well. And the thing that sucks for Quinn Ewers is that his backup came in and had 5 touchdowns. So people forget that he actually had a fairly solid game and then got hurt, and then his backup came in and just killed it the rest of the game. 5 touchdowns for the most hyped prospect in God knows how many years. And most people, it's just because his name's Manning, which I think is a very valid reason for him to be as hyped as he is, because unless it's freaking Manning. That's football royalty right there. Playing for Texas, one of the most recognizable brands, maybe the biggest brand in college football. Brand. Being careful here. Brand. I'm not saying the biggest and best college football team in general, but the brand, you can make an argument, Texas is the biggest brand in college football. Depending on who you ask, obviously, because there's a lot of people that really despise Texas. But I hope Quinn Ewers comes back with a speedy recovery. Number 4, Drew Aller. Didn't play this week. Had some good things happen against Bowling Green. Had some things he wants back. Let me talk about the touchdown to Nick Singleton. I thought that was a very good throw from him. He had a back shoulder throw to his tight end in the game, but shouldn't probably have not been a back shoulder throw because he was wide open. But in a general sense, I like the back shoulder throw. I can't complain about it, but when it should be a walk-in touchdown, it turns into a back shoulder throw, and you go out of bounds. That's not necessarily the most ideal thing in the world. He did have a rushing touchdown in the game as well. He has 3 passing touchdowns on the season so far. They're playing Kent State, like we brought up before. Kent State stinks. Kent State just lost to Tennessee 71-0. They lost to St. Francis. Like, Penn State, really, if we're comparing MAC schools, Bowling Green and Kent State, Penn State should have a fantastic game against Kent State. Drew Aller should have a fantastic game against Kent State. There's no reason he shouldn't have a great game against Penn State. I'm sure they got absolutely reamed this week at practice. And Bowling Green's not a terrible team. They got some disgusting uniforms, but that's about it. They're not a horrific football team. The most horrific team I've ever seen in my life. In some aspect. No, I'm joking. Kent State is, though. Kent State freaking stinks. Number 5, Cameron Ward played Ball State. We said they were going to beat the piss out of them. They won 62-0. Cam Ward had 5 touchdowns. 346 yards. And depending on who you ask, I guess in my opinion, Quinn Ewers is obviously up there. But the top 2 guys in the Heisman Trophy race at this point in time are Cam Ward from Miami and Jalen Milroe from Alabama. Jalen Milroe in Alabama had one of the easiest games on the road against a top Power 4 school I've seen in a little bit. Like, Wisconsin historically is not an easy place to go to. But I don't think a lot of people thought that Wisconsin was actually going to compete in this game against Alabama. Even more so when Tyler Van Dyke went down with the injury. Which, speedy recovery for him. I haven't seen anything about if his injury is long-term or anything like that. But this game was just easy. Just easy. I mean, Jalen Milroe leads the nation in touchdowns. Total touchdowns. He had 8 passing, 6 rushing touchdowns. He had 5 incompletions in this game, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 75 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns as well. Jalen Milroe has all the pieces to be a very good quarterback. All the pieces. Deep ball's there. Mobility's there. Still needs to work on some of the intermediate throws, but the potential is definitely there. And I think if we're standing here right now on September 19th, Jalen Milroe and Cam Ward are my 2 Heisman favorites. Those are my 2 Heisman favorites. And that's not disrespecting Genty from Boise State or Quinn Ewers or whoever else you want to throw up in that conversation. Carson Beck, maybe you want to throw in that conversation. I don't know. Caleb Johnson, question mark? Travis Hunter, obviously, is going to be mentioned in that category as well. But I would say those 2. I'd say out of those 2, I would say Jalen Milroe's number 1 at this point. I mean, if you're comparing schools that they've played, Miami beat the piss out of Florida. Alabama beat the piss out of Wisconsin. Who's worse? Who's better in this state? I mean, Graham Mertz, the kind of starting quarterback at Florida. Is he still the guaranteed starter at Florida? He only started last week against Texas A&M, but he transferred from Wisconsin. So, I don't know. But Jalen Milroe looked good against Wisconsin. Very easy. Easy game. And I was watching the game, and Joel Klatt says, like, time possession's heavily in favor of Wisconsin, but that's kind of misleading because Alabama's just scoring so fast. Very misleading, that stat, because Alabama just not stop scoring. And Jalen Milroe is the main cause for that. 5 total touchdowns in this game. 42-10. 42-10 victors. 5 total touchdowns for Jalen Milroe. And Cameron Ward, 5 touchdowns passing for him. I think we're talking about from a passing standpoint, Cameron Ward is above Jalen Milroe. He is. Athlete standpoint, you would say Jalen Milroe, but that's no disrespect to Cameron Ward. Cameron Ward's a great athlete too. Because Cameron Ward can make some great throws on the run. He can contort his body in a lot of different angles to make out every single throw on the field. You saw last week against Florida A&M, I had a little brain fart there, with his diving touchdown. Like, he's got some really good athleticism in there. You just don't see it as much because he's such an elite passer. Jalen Milroe still got to grow as a passer. He's got the foundational pieces in place. He just still needs to grow to that level. But athletic ability, he's probably the most athletic quarterback in this draft class. Cameron Ward's probably number 2, depending on who you ask. Like, who else would you say is in that category for, like, athletes at the quarterback position in this draft? Jackson Dart, he could be kind of in that conversation. He's a good athlete from the quarterback position. He comes in at number 7. Not a lot to really talk about here. They played Wake Forest. He threw an interception, first interception of the season. Lists under 400 yards passing, 2 touchdowns in the game. Also had a rushing touchdown, 35 yards rushing in there. Easy game. Ole Miss are steamrolling teams right now. Wake Forest, yes, ACC team, I know, but did anybody actually think that Wake Forest was going to do anything against Ole Miss? Did we actually see that? I guess I forgot to mention this. Cameron Ward in Miami, they're playing South Florida. Jalen Milroe and Alabama are on a bye. And then Jackson Dart and Ole Miss, they're taking on Georgia Southern. So I kind of expect Ole Miss to have a fun day there as well. Jackson Dart right now, 1,172 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, with 3 rushing touchdowns as well. So 11 total touchdowns on the season. He's definitely in that conversation as well for the Heisman. I forgot to mention him earlier. He's definitely in that conversation as well for the Heisman. Definitely. Jalen Milroe only has 590 passing yards this year. But he has 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. He has 156 yards on the ground with 6 touchdowns there as well. Cameron Ward has just under 1,100 yards passing. He has 1,035 yards with 11 touchdowns, 1 pick. Also 46 yards rushing and 1 touchdown. So 12 touchdowns for him, 14 for Jalen Milroe, and Jackson Dart has 11 himself. So you got a lot of touchdowns between those 3 quarterbacks. A lot of touchdowns. Speaking of a lot of touchdowns here, throwing the ball, Garrett Nussmeier for LSU against South Carolina, not the greatest game of all time. Not the greatest game of all time against South Carolina. A lot of weird moments in this game. The one that the moment that stands out to me more than anything in this game was the fumbled snap. Or not really the fumbled snap, it was just the snap that hit him when he wasn't paying attention. And then why he argued with the ref, I don't know what the argument was. I don't know what he was trying to do. I respect the effort of trying to get something out of it, but I just don't get I don't get what the argument was. But despite that, though he did have an interception in this game, which was not a great throw, should have been a pick 6 had not been for a penalty. I think it was a block it was a late hit on Nussmeier. Absolutely laid him out, leveled him. Not a great throw in the red zone too. But Nussmeier has a very good arm. Nussmeier sometimes gets in the habit of having this thing called arm arrogance, which is a very fun phrase. I really enjoy the phrase arm arrogance because it basically says, I'm going to make every single frickin' throw out there, which is not humanly possible. It is impossible to make every single throw out there. But when you have this thing called arm arrogance, you believe you can. And Nussmeier, from time to time, has that. And you saw that in action here against South Carolina. Like, there were some throws he had down the sideline that were fantastic throws. Fantastic throws. But then you have the interception. Like, not great. Not great stuff. And this year we brought the touchdowns. He has 10 passing touchdowns on the season so far. 2 interceptions, yes, not great. The last one against USC, not ideal. Especially when Brian Kelly went out after the game and threw him under the bus. Completely under the bus. And then backed over him with the bus as well. But Garrett Nussmeier, not the greatest game against South Carolina, but they won They tried their hardest to lose this game. They tried their damnedest to try and lose this game, but they came out on top. So that's all you can really ask for at South Carolina. South Carolina team feeling themselves after they just beat the piss out of Kentucky like we brought up before. Want to beat LSU. I mean, I think a lot of people want to beat LSU. I think a lot of people at this point in time are kind of cheering for LSU to lose just because Brian Kelly's so freaking annoying down there at LSU. I could be wrong, but that's my perspective here in Iowa, just from what I can tell. But LSU, they play UCLA. They should have no real problems there. And the number 9 and 10, neither one of these guys played this week. It's Connor Wegman and Will Howard. Connor Wegman because he had a shoulder issue. Will Howard because he didn't play, because he was on a bye week. Connor Wegman, I haven't heard if he's going to play or not or seen anything if he's going to play this week. He looked a lot better 2 weeks ago against McNeese State, which is insane to say. Wow, yeah, he looked a lot better against McNeese State than he did against Notre Dame. Can you believe that? But you need games like that for confidence. It's not that he played the most insane game of all time, but you kind of need games like that to kind of just boost your confidence back up because he played like piss against Notre Dame. That's putting it lightly. He played like absolute piss against Notre Dame. So we'll see if he plays this week. They're playing Bowling Green, which could cause them some problems. They caused Penn State problems last week, or 2 weeks ago, sorry. So maybe we see them cause some problems for A&M this week. Who the hell knows, but I'm intrigued to see if Connor Wegman actually plays. Then Will Howard and Ohio State, they play Marshall. So I really don't think Ohio State will have, too many issues against Marshall. But I don't think a lot of people are expecting them to struggle as much as they did against, Akron in week 1? I don't think a lot of people are really expecting that as well. But you know what? Crazy shit happens like that sometimes. Crazy stuff happens like that. But yeah, that's your top 10 quarterbacks from last week, week 3 of college football. If you are a learned person, you could tell that we only made one change from the week before. And it kind of helps that there were so many freaking injuries and bye weeks. Like, Will Howard had a bye. Connor Wegman was hurt. Then we had, what other games we have here? Drew Aller was on a bye. Quinn Ewers got hurt. There's a few, and then you got Cameron Ward played Ball State and threw a bunch of touchdowns. Shocker. Stuff like that. But like I said, that top spot will be very, very chaotic as the season goes on. Other performances that I should probably pay attention to or point out, Dylan Gabriel, solid game against Oregon State. Oregon finally looked like the team we thought Oregon would be at the start of the year. He had 2 touchdowns, 291 yards passing in there as well. Riley Leonard still has not thrown a passing touchdown this year. Still has yet to throw a passing touchdown, but was a little more consistent throwing the ball against Purdue. And he had 3 rushing touchdowns. And Notre Dame exercised a lot of demons against Purdue this past weekend. What was the score? 66-7? Yeah, they exercised as much demons as they possibly could. Noah Fafita, who I believe we brought up last week, he did not have the greatest game of all time against Kansas State, but nobody really on Arizona did. They lost 31-7 against the Wildcats this past weekend. Not necessarily the most ideal situation to be in the world. And Donovan Smith, 142 yards passing and a 33-7 win over Rice this weekend. Had also 2 rushing touchdowns, had 3 total touchdowns, had 1 passing touchdown, 2 rushing touchdowns in there as well. So those are your top 10 quarterbacks with some honorable mentions in there as well. Make sure to check out the blog post. They'll be in the description of the YouTube video. And you can just go to the LoganBlackmanShow.com and go under the blog section there as well to check it out there. I would greatly appreciate it.